Okay, as promised, here is the second video that talks about the current market, predictions for what the market's going to be like in 2022. We will go over, is now still a good time to buy? Should I wait? All the good things that I promised. So we'll get started. Alrighty, so the first graph and information I want to go over is appreciation. So appreciation, you can see in 2020 was at 6%, and 2021 15%, which was pretty epic. So in 2020, remember, we had COVID, we had all of the uncertainty of what was going to happen, how that was going to affect the marketplace, and people, it was hard to move. There's a lot of things going on during 2020 that would lead to a 6% appreciation rate, which is a great rate. It just, you can see in 2021 we kind of settled back down, and that appreciation rate is enormous at 15%. The prediction for 2022 is 9.6%, which is better than 2020, which is amazing. Slightly less than 2021, which is good. I mean, it's still appreciating, but not at an enormous rate. We have to remember that interest rates are going up this year, or they've already gone up, and they'll continue to rise. So that's going to affect. It's the fact that it's rising 9.6% is going to help affordability, but it also makes sense why it's not going to be. The market can't be 15% again, and with the same interest rates, people would have problems qualifying. So that's appreciation. In more depth about the appreciation, you'll see 2021 last year how the appreciation increased. So that average that I showed you on the last slide is an average of last year. So it started at 10% appreciation, and then it slowly rose as the year went on, which would make sense again with um, the issues with COVID, sort of us all figuring out how to manage that. So you could see that increasing. You can see for the last since July of last year, really, it was pretty steady. So it was pretty steady at 18%. You can see at the end of the year, it started to tick up above the 18%. So, what are we expecting the housing values or prices to do in 2022? Which is a huge question I get from clients that are looking to sell and buy. If you're buying, you're wondering, are they going to continue to rise? Should I wait for them to come back down? Are they going to steady out? Or when should I sell my house? So, this is we have a bunch of very smart organizations and people that have made their predictions for 2022. And so the average is 6.13% of the average price forecast, the increase for the next year of appreciation. So you can see they're all, I mean, CoreLogic is pretty optimistic. The other organizations are, they vary in predictions, but around 6.13% of the anticipated appreciation for 2020. So, new listings, as you can see, were they increase traditionally throughout the year. So June and July have traditionally the most amount of inventory. So seeing the inventory go down towards the end of the year is not surprising, but as you can see, it was kind of a sharp decline this year. And this also sort of lines up with when interest rates started to rise. So like I had mentioned, some people staying put due to increase in interest rates. I think that's evidenced by the even lower inventory than we normally see in the winter months. In the last slide, I talked about inventory. So we do have a low inventory, meaning things are going rather quickly. In 2021, you can see that we had a huge amount of existing home sales. So more a 15-year record, which is pretty amazing. But let's think about 2021. We had people feeling pretty optimistic about the market, because interest rates were very low and values were high, and continue to be high. So a lot of people made a move, or they needed more space because they realized during COVID that it's too small. But the inventory remained low because, like I talked about in the last video, there was a huge span of time where new construction was not happening because builders went out of business. You know, they didn't have new construction going on. So the inventory that also impacts the inventory and why there's the existing home market is so strong. It's not like last time. What I've been saying the whole time, but now I got a slide to prove it. Is the um, look at the credit scores from 2007 and earlier. I mean, 620, these are the loans in billions with a credit score below 620. So you'll see into the we tightened those underwriting guidelines up real quick. Um, so a lot of complaints, a lot of complaints those years about underwriting being or mortgage getting approved for a mortgage being really difficult, and they're not wrong. It's just if you look at we were pretty loosey goosey with things prior to that, and you can see we've continued to be very um, kind of mindful and strict regarding credit score and credit history. So let's feel good about that and people being actually qualified for their home. This might be my favorite graph because it really does touch back to what I talked about in the last video about qualifying and how people were very over leveraged in 2006, which sort of led to the housing bubble. You can see that we're up from 2013, which is sort of where the bottom of the market was 2012, 2013. So we've kind of we're up from that point, but people are still, conservative. Their mortgage payment to their income is a reasonable amount. So that should make everyone feel pretty confident about um, the people's stability and ability to make the repayment, which the stability that to not make the repayment, which led to a lot of people not, missing payments, distressed properties, a sudden inflow onto the inventory, which led to, right now we have a shortage. It led to, homes languishing on the market um, during that time.
I find this slide very inspiring that buyers are sort of living within their means. They qualify for more than they are taking out in their monthly payment, which means that, if life were to happen, that they would ideally have some additional funds if needed for any emergencies that might come up. It also means that they are mindful of how much they're spending per month. And maybe I always start with how much do you want to spend per month, and then we work backwards to a purchase price. So people are mindful of a budget when they start looking at a home. It also, again, with the concern about increase, sort of a housing bubble. The idea is that it's it feels good that people are not sort of leveraging themselves too much with their house payment.
A big thing that the industry did different during COVID than it did during the housing burst of 2007 was that we had a plan for those that had concerns about not making their mortgage payment during COVID, especially at the beginning when we're figuring out, people were out of work and all of those things. Like I mentioned in the last video, people had a hard time figuring out who to contact for modifications or to tell them they couldn't make the payment. And now we have figured that out. We have a system in place. So you can see the loans that are um, exiting forbearance and how people are making monthly payments. It's in loan deferral. They were able to set up a modification. Those things, 38% of them paid them off in full. So that's great news. Another thing I wanted to talk about with forbearance, which is student loans. So as we know, the government put student loans in forbearance and continue to kind of kick the can down the road. And a concern might be what happens when the government finally has people making their payments again? How is that going to affect spending? And So for mortgages, I want everyone to know that we qualify people even if you're in forbearance with a monthly payment. So we calculate a 0.5% of the balance or 1% of the balance, depending on the program, um, as a monthly payment, even if they're not making one. So when those when eventually payments are having to be made again, know that people are qualified with a payment. So it's not going to be suddenly not affording their mortgage payment. That will affect spending, I'm sure. I mean that income, I mean that disposable income will decrease. So that is a concern. But as far as housing, um, we qualify people with a payment. So rest assured that even if you don't make a payment and you owe $300,000 in student loans, we're still making sure that you qualify with some sort of payment for that amount. So we saw that forbearances and that people have worked out a payment plan for forbearances, and there's again a process in place, uh, streamlined now. If you need help with your mortgage on how to get that sorted out prior to being at a position where you're in a foreclosure situation. So we're going back in time again and look at the amount of foreclosures in 2009. I mean, 2.8 million. 2.8 million. Think about all that inventory. And again, like I mentioned in the last video, it took years in some cases for the foreclosures to hit the market because the process sometimes took years to sort out. I remember talking to clients who said, I had a foreclosure. There's a waiting period in order to finance again. They had thought the waiting period had been up. And then I look at the deed and the for actual foreclosure happened 3 years after they had left the house where they had signed everything, 3 years till it was recorded, meaning the waiting period didn't start until then. So if you look at like, look at that. Look at that. Look at that amount of inventory that was sucked up. And then think about all of those people that could not purchase a home during that time because of a waiting period. And then they've slowly re-entered the market and the inventory and the market has expanded as people have aged. So there's more people on the market and there's no, it's bananas. Think about when you like the bottom of the market, that's all that inventory from those foreclosures. So more on the equity, and this is a localized, some of the previous slides were national. If you look at Oregon and Washington, and the increase in equity growth is pretty 66,000 and 96,000 in Washington. So quite a bit of equity growth continuing to rise in especially in our localized market. I mean, the West Coast in particular is pretty strong with continuing to have an increase in equity. So the question of is it still a good time to buy? If I think that the housing bubble burst is the concern is my value going to go down? And I'm going to be underwater and stuck in this home. A lot of the things that cause the housing bubble to burst prior are have been resolved. So it's really value. And in this graph, you'll see the estimate for household wealth increasing over 5 years based on um, a home purchase now and how much the value would increase over the 5 years. And it's about $90,000, which is an amazing sort of savings plan. Um, so, I mean, and I think, I hesitate to, in 2007 and 2008, a lot of people, or 2006, I should say, used their home as a ATM and took cash out. And that's one of like, as values increased, they got cash out to, in some cases, pay off debt. It was all great. But when that value went away, so I hesitate to have the idea of your home being like a cash machine where it's always available. But I think this isn't saying it's going down. you know? So if we are just at baseline, that's a pretty that feels pretty good. You're paying down, you're not paying another person. Um, it's still a great investment. Real estate continues to be a great investment. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions about the market, please reach out and let me know, or any thoughts. I guess to summarize, we're not. I don't think we're in a housing bubble. I think rate home prices will continue to rise, and I think you can see in the graphs that other people also believe that. The driver is inventory, and I also want to point out that interest rates are going to continue to rise. And so I have been in the industry for 15 years, and it has probably been 13 years since we've had rates in the fives. So it's everyone has to adjust to that being the new normal. It was bound to happen. I'm surprised it took so long for us to get into the fives, but life events have made it that we had low interest rates for a very long time. So we'll have to get used to this new normal. And while it will affect people's ability to purchase, um, it'll slow down the appreciation like they're predicting. But homes are expected to continue to appreciate despite the higher interest rates. But as you're going through the process, I think it's very important to continue, like when you look at houses, I send people numbers all the time, to keep an eye on interest rates, because in November we were at 3.25, and now we're in the fives. So that's a huge jump in what your monthly payment will be. So being mindful of that. But I don't think the market is going to um, you know slow down substantially. I mean, there's still multiple offers, and a lot of waiving of contingencies. And again, we have that cash program that is helping people get into homes. Um, so I would love to help. I would love to know what your thoughts are on the market. I love to hear it. But I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.